Welcome to CinemaSpection. I'm Tim.
I'm Chris.
Sarah.
I'm Corinne.
And this time we're sitting down to a nice glass of wine while we discuss Frank Capra's Arsenic and Old Lace from 1944.
It does, well, let it.
Now, wait a minute. Listen, you can't marry me one minute and throw me out of the house the next.
Oh, darling, I'm not throwing you out of the house. I'm not throwing you out of the house. Will you get out of here? No, I can't. I won't. I can't go through with it. I won't marry you, and that's that.
Listen.
Look, don't you see, marriage, it's a superstition. It's old-fashioned. Oh.
Mortimer, have you forgotten the things I used to do to you? When you were tied to the bedpost, the needles under your fingernails.
Mortimer!
Wait a minute. Holy mackerel! Where'd you get that face, Hollywood? But there's a body in the window seat.
Yes, dear. We know.
Despite his criticism of the institution of marriage, author Mortimer Brewster marries the literal girl next door. As they are about to embark on their honeymoon, he stops by his family home to visit his two elderly aunts and his delusional brother Teddy, who believes he's Teddy Roosevelt and is due to be committed to a mental hospital. But upon discovering a corpse hidden in the house, he learns that his kindly aunts have been poisoning old bachelors, something they consider to be a charitable act for such lonely men. While Mortimer struggles to keep his aunt's crimes buried in the basement, his murderously criminal brother Jonathan and Jonathan's unscrupulous plastic surgeon Dr. Einstein decide to visit with their own body to dispose of. Is it any wonder Mortimer begins to worry he'll continue the family tradition and lose his mind? As per usual, we'll be discussing Arsenic and Old Lace in detail, so if you haven't seen the movie and want to remain unspoiled, we recommend you watch the film before listening to the rest of this episode. Alright, what's everybody's previous experiences with this movie?
My mother showed it to me when I was young. Said it's a funny movie. We were kind of in a phase of my brother bringing in like Alfred Hitchcock and other type of old films. She's like, this one's hilarious, and gave me no prior idea of what was going on. So the somewhat dark undertones of the movie hit me square in the face. And it was kind of awesome to experience it that way the first time, like I'd imagine a lot of people in cinemas did.
Sarah?
I believe I saw this movie about 10 years ago in a film studies class, but I'm still not 100% sure it was the same one. I think I had probably the same reaction that I had now, that it was hilarious, but very, very odd.
I read the play in my mid-20s, but this is the first time I've seen the film.
Oh, no way. I didn't know we had a first
Yeah,
timer.
first time.
Do you remember from reading the play, is it very different?
It's not very different, but there's always going to be a different dynamic when you're reading it than when you're seeing it. And this is definitely a play that you want to see. And it was much more enjoyable.
For me, I remember, like a lot of movies, catching it in the middle. I was watching it on TCM. And it's funny because I turned it on right during the scene where Mortimer is tied up and Jonathan's about to operate on him. And coming into it, I didn't know it was a comedy. So from that scene, I thought, oh, this is a suspense movie. Is this one of the Cary Grant Hitchcock movies I've never seen? And then I kept watching and got to the fight scene and was very confused, like, all right, now it's really funny. So finally, once I found out what it is, went back and saw the rest of it, and in context, oh, okay, it's all funny, it's all a comedy. But taking that scene out of the rest of the context of the movie, it's shot like a suspense scene, so I was very confused for a little while.
I could see this as a play reading, I won't say almost generic, but the character tropes all work comedically. But on any of their own, they would read to me as almost being like, alright, that's stock villain character who does stock villain things. Stock bumbling cop character. But when you put them all together, it's something else completely.
It's a farce.
Yeah, with just a tiny turn, a lot of these characters could be in a really dramatic suspense movie.
Right. With
possibly the exception of Teddy. Little info on the movie. It was released by Warner Brothers on September 23rd, 1944, and filmed for a budget of $1,120,000. I couldn't find any figures on what it did for a box office, although I guess it was a pretty solid hit. And of course, was based on the play by Joseph Kesselring.
I think it's fair to mention that it was filmed in 1941.
Yeah, and delayed due to a contractual issue where the producers of the play actually made them wait until the play had finished its Broadway run before they could actually release it in the movie theater, because they were afraid it might detract from Broadway audiences.
So it was filmed many years before a German plastic surgeon would be topical. As being a creepy thing.
Let's talk cast and their characters. First off, we have Cary Grant as Mortimer Brewster. course, Grant is equally adept at playing very slick, debonair characters like he does in the Hitchcock films, and really goofy comedic ones. In that sense, he kind of reminds me of George Clooney, where you can play this very cool, suave, romantic lead and then be in a Coen Brothers movie and act like a total idiot and be wonderful at it.
This was full-on, oh brother, where art thou level. Damn, we're in a tight spot.
I guess from what I was reading in my research, he thought his acting was over the top and didn't like it, so it wasn't one of his favorite performances.
I loved the over-the-top performance.
I loved it too, so I think he's stupid.
We really needed that kind of big look at the audience, the big eyes, the big reaction, just to show us that this isn't serious, this is all a farce. He's seeing it from an insider who is also outside as just absurd.
I just liked all the communication without words and stuff. Even when he wasn't gagged, there was still times when he just was making sounds and it was just hysterical.
Just muttering, yeah.
He was just at his wit's end. I can't even make human noises anymore. It was like a live-action Bugs Bunny cartoon at times.
Yes.
And that performance, it's important to the whole idea that he thinks he might go mad eventually, and during the course of the film we think, all right, maybe this is it. Maybe this is him going insane.
Maybe the whole point of this story is he's the one that gets locked up.
I thought it was going there.
Among those originally considered for the part were Bob Hope, although he couldn't get out of his contract at a different studio, Ronald Reagan, and Jack Benny. Grant always thought that Jimmy Stewart actually would have been a better choice for the part.
Given the subject matter, it would have been hilarious if Ronald Reagan had been cast.
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, I don't know if he would have been able to pull off just how large the role needed to be played, but historically it would have been hilarious.
And Grant actually donated his $100,000 payday for the movie right to the U.S. War Relief Fund, because this is, of course, right when the war was starting to gear up in Europe.
He was an interesting character because when you first meet him, you're like, he's a dickhead. You don't really figure out why he doesn't want to marry her, and you can tell she looks hurt.
Rice and old shoes, carry over the threshold, Niagara Falls, all the city tribe I've made fun of for years. Is this what I've come to? I can't go through with it. I won't marry you, and that's that. What do you mean, yes, Mortimer? Aren't you insulted? Aren't you going to cry? Aren't you going to make a scene? No. And don't know Mortimer, me either. Look, don't you see, marriage is a superstition. It's old-fashioned. It's...
But then afterwards, how could he snap his fingers and go from, I don't want to have anything to do with you, to, okay, I'm in love with you, I'm going to marry you?
Well, there's the emotional versus the mental. He's been writing his entire life on just how bad marriage is, that nobody should be involved in a marriage. But he loves her.
And then once you see them come out of the taxi and I'm happy, you like his character, especially when you see him interacting with the aunts. Maybe he's not so bad after all, and then you see how he's treating her again, but it's the stress of what's going on. He's trying to protect her.
You notice somebody says at one point to him in the movie, why can't you act the way that you see the men in all of those plays act? I almost think the thing he's given her is just what he thinks. If you notice, the minute he gets there, he calls up, hey, remember those flowers I had sent there? Send this other thing over there, and this and that. That sounds nice, right? And it's almost like it's a checklist he's going down rather than he actually means any of it.
One other thing with Mortimer is his attitudes toward marriage. We have to wonder, where did they come from?
Yes.
Because we don't really find out what happened to his parents exactly.
Right.
Well, he's also been in this environment where we could easily imagine the aunts pushing him towards marriage all the time. We see that they've actually been sort of secretly behind the scenes planning for him to get married to Elaine this whole time.
Also, we only hear about the grandfather. We don't hear about the grandmother. Of
or
course,
parents.
We've got absent parents. So all relationships are pulled away for one reason or another.
Well, there's also the question of later on in the movie we find out he's always known about this history of insanity in his family. And I wonder if maybe that's part of the reason why he's built up this anti-marriage thing in his brain.
Darling, I love you so much, I can't go through with our marriage.
Have you suddenly gone crazy?
No, I don't think so. It's only a matter of time. Look, darling. You wouldn't want to have children with 3 heads, would you? I mean, you wouldn't want to set up housekeeping in a padded cell. Oh, it'd be bad.
What are you talking about?
Oh, I don't quite know, Elaine. Look, I probably should have told you this before, but you see, well, insanity runs in my family. It practically gallops.
As over the top as it was, it's almost realistic, because how else would you act in that situation? You have all these different people you got to protect, and he doesn't want to see his mate and aunts in jail. He wants to protect his brother.
He's struggling to prioritize.
It was like a Chevy Chase dealing with everything around him breaking down, kind of.
Next, we have Josephine Hull playing Abby Brewster. Hull was primarily known at first as a stage actor, having appeared in plays such as You Can't Take It With You and Harvey, as well as the original Arsenic and Old Lace. She actually only made 6 movies, but won an Oscar for recreating her role in Harvey with Jimmy Stewart, and appeared as Abby Brewster one more time in a television version of the play years later. And alongside her is Jean Adair as Martha Brewster. Adair is also from the stage, and of course also appeared in the original play, as well as productions such as Picnic, Bell, Book and Candle, and The Crucible. And her film career included parts in Something in the Wind and The Naked City. And Adair was actually friends with Grant, and it helped him recover from an illness when he got really sick back when they were both vaudeville performers.
My first thought was Aunt Bethany in Christmas Vacation. If she had a sister and they went nuts and were killing people. And the other thing that they kind of reminded me of are a very twisted version of the fairies in Sleeping Beauty.
They did have a very mincing kind of we are gentle ladies manner about them.
If the fairies went batshit and started killing people,
they're genteel.
And the fact that there's, in their minds, nothing nefarious about what they're doing. This is 100% just okay.
Well,
to the point where they can tell a police officer, of course there's 12 bodies in the basement.
It's Christian charity. They're helping the unfortunates.
Terrifying.
And another symptom of mental illness, they don't even actually understand what they're doing, because they're talking about, what's his name, in the window seat. Oh, he must be so uncomfortable in there. Not even comprehending he's dead. He can't feel that.
Throughout the whole thing, they keep saying, the poor dear or whatever, because he's not there making him wait to be buried. Like, he's aware. He's dead!
Or that they're horrified at seeing a scary horror movie. Why do they make those things? And they won't have harsh language in their house. But poisoning people, perfectly fine.
And I was going to talk to exactly that. As soon as you meet them, something's up. The movie doesn't hide that something's up, but it takes them so long to really tell you what it is. And you meet Abby first. And Abby's kind of the bumbling fun, and then when the other one comes, it's like, okay, as soon as they're together, it's like, oh, the plan is set, and we know what's going on, but they're still lighthearted. Oh, we're just getting ready for dinner, and there happens to be a body in the window box.
Their performances are fantastic.
Yeah.
You can't look at them like, oh, those are just actresses. Like, you really think you're watching two nutty old aunts.
I go back always to when they're telling him how they poisoned the guy. They're so excited that they made it taste good.
Mortimer,
Mama.
do you remember those jars of poison that have been on the shelves in Grandfather's laboratory all these years? You know your Aunt Martha's knack for mixing things. You've eaten enough of her piccalilli. Well, dear, for a gallon of elderberry wine, I take 1 teaspoonful of arsenic, then add half a teaspoonful of strychnine, and then just a pinch of cyanide.
Should have quite a kick.
Yes. As a matter of fact, one of our gentlemen found time to say how delicious.
There's also that sense of almost pride of a cook or a chef.
Right.
That we've got the right recipe. We've got just our own special blend of poisons just to make it the perfect
Which is
drink.
where the last name Brewster, B-R-E-W, Brewster, comes in, as well as the idea of them being witches.
Yeah, it goes back to that image. And as pretty much the real villain of the movie, we have Raymond Massey playing Jonathan Brewster. Massey had such iconic film roles as Sherlock Holmes in The Speckled Band, the first film version of a Sherlock Holmes story. The Scarlet Pimpernel, and as Abe Lincoln in Abe Lincoln in Illinois, which earned him an Oscar nomination. And of course, the part, as is heavily hinted at throughout the movie, was originally played by Boris Karloff on Broadway, but Karloff, since he was a huge draw for the stage audiences, they wouldn't actually allow him to take a break from the Broadway production to appear in the movie. So they put Massey in really heavy makeup for the part, and allegedly he actually had to sign a release just in case Karloff decided to sue over how close the likeness was.
That's fantastic.
I disagree that Jonathan is the villain in the movie. I think he's our red herring. We're supposed to think as an audience, this is the bad guy. The music is telling us, his stature is telling us, but he's just one cog in this crazy nuthouse wheel.
But for me, he's the only one who, while everyone is committing crazy crimes, he's the only one who seems malicious about it.
He is malicious, but they all have their ways of being malicious. Mortimer is just cruel to his girlfriend and then fiance and wife. He's hiding her. He's hiding her from the press. He's even hiding her from his family.
All aspects of his life.
And the aunts, of course, they have a kind cruelty. It is cruel to poison people who they have deemed unfortunate or lesser than. So they all have different kinds of cruelty. But as human beings, we see grotesque murders and just violent acts, very violent physical acts, as bad, as worse than. So, of course, he's our villain.
Well, I guess there's also the fact, unlike any of the other characters, he doesn't have any redeemable qualities about him whatsoever. We never see him doing anything even remotely nice for anybody else.
Do we really believe that the aunts have a redeeming quality?
Well, despite what they're doing, they are trying to do it for what they think are nice reasons.
But that's just a hypocrisy.
Right.
You know,
the
we are
movies-
good Christian women while they're killing people because they, in their superiority, have deemed them lower than them. So they feel free to take their life because they're putting them out of their misery.
I don't think it's as much lower than as they, again, feel like they're doing a charitable
Well, they're giving
act.
charity. And
Yeah.
when you give charity, you usually give charity to somebody who has less than you do, who is in a lower social or societal standing.
Well, even beyond that, we see that they're donating toys to kids. They're nice with all the kids in the neighborhood.
But that's the same thing. That's the Christian hypocrisy.
I don't know. I still
Well,
don't
they
see
took
them as
in their
really...
3 batshit nephews.
There's
If
that, too,
if
yeah.
the movie thought they were
See-
redeemable, though, if the movie thought they were fully redeemable, because I think there's a halfway point between that. I mean, senseless murder is not redeemable no matter which way you slice it. But as far as in the arc that they're given in the movie, if the movie felt they were fully redeemable, then they wouldn't have gone to the nut house at the end.
Well, not fully redeemable, but at least there's something. Like, Jonathan, we see, doesn't have that option. He's going to prison, which we really want him to go to prison.
Well, it's also what we decide as a society is a punishable act.
And-
These people are crazy because what they're saying is crazy, so we're just going to put them in the nut house where they'll stay safe. This guy, on the other hand, who has also killed an equal number to the aunts, they've both killed 12 people, or 13 or 11, depending on who you ask. He's being sent to jail with other violent offenders.
Not a single one of them gives a crap about the existence of Jonathan until he shows up, and even then, it's not this terrible, terrible thing that he's there for a little bit. Mortimer goes for an entire sequence where this man tried to kill his wife.
Yes.
And doesn't seem to give a crap because the only thing he cares about is getting Teddy put in the mental hospital so then he can pang the crime on Teddy, but since he's in the mental hospital, nothing worse will happen to him.
Well,
So that kind of backs that up
Well, he's
a
doing
little
it to
bit, I
protect
think.
the aunts.
yeah, I think what's happening is that he's putting Teddy in the nut house because he knows that Teddy's helping them and that the aunts won't be able to carry out any more murders without their busboy, basically.
I guess that would be another argument for me as to why the aunts aren't quite as bad as Jonathan is. That we want to see Jonathan go to prison, but a lot of the suspense of the movie is Mortimer trying to keep their crimes hidden from the police.
But who's to say if the aunts and Teddy aren't together in the mental hospital that we're not going to have a Panama Canal in the basement?
We may, but I think there'd be a
do
little closely
think-
They
supervised
seemed a
there.
little too quick to need to be with Teddy.
But that could be the redeeming quality of theirs, is that they want it, because they said they're not putting him in that place until they pass away, so they want to see him through till they pass.
But they need him around.
That too.
Well, let me ask this question, going back to the Karloff thing. Do you think this movie would have worked better with Karloff in the role of Jonathan?
No.
No, I think Karloff is serious scary.
That's what I think.
Jonathan, the whole... And again, I've never read how it's written in the play, so I don't know if in the play that character really is supposed to come off as serious scary, but in this, I don't know if it's intentional, if it's maybe him not being as great of an actor as Boris Karloff might have been, but this comes off almost as if the movie intentionally wants him to be so over the top, trying to be the big baddie, that he actually comes off as being the bumbling idiot at being the big baddie. You know, I mean, even the fact that him and his partner in crime argue over the best way to kill somebody because they can't decide if it should be a quick or a slow death, and it doesn't seem like he's all that great.
I love the fact that he is the most conspicuous person on the planet. There is no moment where Jonathan could ever play something where he seems unsuspicious. Jonathan just looks exasperated with all this crap he has to deal with.
Teddy, I think it's time for you to go to bed.
I beg your pardon. Who are you?
I'm Woodrow Wilson. Go to bed.
He constantly seems
That was-
annoyed, and he just wants to snap. He doesn't want to have to deal with his aunts. He doesn't want to have to deal with Mortimer.
And he wants to threaten all of these people with things he's done to them before. He never does anything, even in this. The bodies are all either... No one does anything. The bodies are all either dead before we get to the scenes that they're in, or he threatens people. The closest he gets to actually doing anything horrific is almost killing Elaine, which we don't see.
He was part of the two people that tied up.
Right, and tying him up.
Yeah,
but even then, they tie him up, but again, it's all threats.
Part of this is rating systems and what can be shown in movies, and part of it is that the actual physical killings has nothing to do with what the play is about.
I think that works to the film's credit in that we don't demonize these people as much because there's never a scene of the women poisoning anybody. So automatically you can kind of lock into the whimsy of it.
The one that he saves, that old guy that comes in.
Yeah, but we never see the horrific act of him dying and them maybe kind of getting a jolly off of it that would affect our ability to accept them as part of the weird pro/antagonist mix of people that we have in this movie.
There's a one-upsmanship between Jonathan and the aunts that is pretty interesting to explore. The aunts have stayed in their home. They don't leave their home, and they've murdered 12 men. Nobody is suspecting them. But Jonathan has murdered the same number of people, 12 people, and he's been running all over the world, had to change his face 3 times to escape the police. So there seems to be a rivalry between Jonathan and the aunts.
You've done all that right here in this house and buried them in the cellar.
That's wonderful, Johnny. We have been chased all over the world. They stay right here in Brooklyn, and they do just as good as you do.
What?
Yeah. You got 12, they got 12.
I've got 13.
No, Johnny, 12. Don't brag.
Do we know why he killed the 12 people he killed?
Well, we clearly see he doesn't like people making comments about his face, but also Einstein comments that anybody who even suspects anything, who witnesses any little bit of his crime, he goes nuts and kills them to cover his tracks.
That can tie right back into Corinne's original statement about, is the movie leaving it open for your societal, the way you see things, to pick which one's right and which one's wrong? Because literally, they have the same one-upping argument down to the point of he has a first person that just happened to die around him that he wants to take as one of his kills. And the aunts argue about the same damn thing.
The aunts try to claim the man who had a heart attack, who was their first kill.
So, coming from the same family with the same psychosis and obviously, or maybe the same starting point that made them all go kind of nutty. I mean, we've heard a testament to the fact that the aunts may have been abused or experimented on by this unseen grandfather. So, I mean, could it just be the same side of the same murderous psychosis?
The other thing is, too, what happened to the brother's parents?
Exactly. That's one of my notes.
They never say. Are we supposed to assume that they died? That whatever was the blood relative to the aunts went batshit, too?
In the very beginning, we get a glimpse of the tombstones, and I do see some names on the tombstones, and I can make the leap that the Brewsters bury their relatives in the graveyard, and that they they bury people that they kill or people that they think are not fit for society in the basement.
Well, it almost seems like the aunts and Jonathan are no different, or at least from what's wrong in their head standpoint.
Next we have Peter Lorre as Dr. Einstein. Of course, Lorre's known for his unique screen presence and as a distinguished character actor. We've already seen him on The Maltese Falcon a while back, and also played creepy characters in movies such as M and Mad Love. And with Maltese Falcon, we saw a little bit of his comedic ability. Here we have it on full display, and he is fantastic here. And he's, ironically, one of the most sympathetic characters in the movie.
He's almost the one person you want to see get out of this house unscathed. One, he seems completely disgusted by the stuff that Jonathan wants him to do, even though he's done it all. He's that, guy that got in too far over his head, we'll say, even though he's also a crazy, potentially Nazi plastic surgeon. But a line from him that exasperated with everything going on around him, and he's almost been arrested 3 or 4 times. Do you want to leave now? Yes, please. It just comes right out of his mind. And
Are you leaving?
Are you leaving?
Yes, please.
I look at him as almost like that unwitting doctor that the Joker happens to come into to get his face fixed up after he falls in the acid, and you're just kind of stuck with the guy at this point.
Well, I also like that he's comparable to Mortimer in that he's a guy who's kind of outside of this to some degree, and like Mortimer, he's trying to balance all these different things going on. There's that great scene where he's just trying to get Mortimer out of the house before Jonathan kills him. And Mortimer is just not hearing what he's saying.
But look, Mr. Brewster, please. You've just been married. You have a nice little wife waiting for you. Please go now. Please.
He actually kind of says something in German, which I guess translates to, "What crimes have I committed to end up here?" And as soon as Jonathan comes up, he realizes, oh, no, I have to play along with Jonathan. And he's trying to subtly tell Mortimer to get out while not making it clear to Jonathan that he is trying to send these signals to Mortimer. The way he plays that, the physical comedy of him trying to get both signals out while Jonathan is sneaking up behind him to tie him up in the chair, is just fantastic. And that alcoholism, the scene where they have the poison wine and the poison flask on the table, and he's reaching for it as the aunts are taking it away, just like, no, please, no. Oh.
And I love I need to be drunk to do the work when it's nasty work. And then promising he won't be drunk when he does Jonathan, even though, okay, every time he's done Jonathan's work, he had to be drunk to do it. It's just, he's like the one trying to, please don't say anything about Boris Karloff the whole time, trying to stop people from saying that.
And at the same time, he's really kind of getting into the fun of it. When Teddy comes up and wants to show him the progress on the canal,
he's very excited.
He's playing along with it. He's kind of enjoying it.
It's almost like he's a human version of your typical Disney villain bubbling sidekick.
Yeah, definitely.
He's our Igor.
And kind of a little bit of an audience star again, that he's kind of enjoying the craziness too, to some degree.
Einstein doesn't go to jail, does he?
No, he actually gets away.
Einstein gets away.
He gets away, and I don't have a problem with that.
No.
I think
feel
that
like he was unwittingly brought in just like Elaine.
Well, he was definitely complicit, but I think that he was afraid.
The fact that he goes to such lengths to try and save Mortimer, I think, kind of redeems him for the audience.
Yeah.
Next is John Alexander as Teddy Brewster. Besides originating the role of Teddy in the Broadway production, his film work included roles in A Tree in Brooklyn, Mr. Skeffington, Winchester 73, and playing Teddy Roosevelt himself in Fancy Pants. His performance reminds me a little bit of Ossie Davis in Bubba Hotep playing Kennedy, that he brings this complete conviction to the part, which should be totally ridiculous, but to the point you almost kind of buy him as Roosevelt.
Yeah.
You buy that he 100% believes that he's Teddy Roosevelt, and that's...
And yet, at the same time, he has this complete awareness of Roosevelt's timeline. So he's like, oh, is this the part where I go to Panama yet? Or is this the part where I go on my African safari? Yay!
He's very aware of Roosevelt and his deeds. I mean, he calls the basement the Panama Canal. And then the staircase is San Juan Hill, which was one of the battles in Cuba. And he talks about going on safari and all of these deeds. Oh, and he even mentions his daughter, Alice. So... He's very intimate with Roosevelt's biography. Oh, he even brings out a book and says, look, it's my autobiography.
And, saying to Einstein, here's you, General. And like, oh, yes, don't I
I've
look
changed
different?
a lot.
There's also this really indulgent quality when it comes to Teddy. I mean, any other relative would be thinking, we've got to break him out of these delusions and do stuff to get him back on the straight and narrow. The aunts seem to regard it as so adorable, and when he tried to be George Washington, he'd stay under his bed and wouldn't want to be anybody at all, and that wasn't any fun.
They're humoring him because they need him.
But also, outside of them, the mental hospital. Oh, we already have a few Teddys. You sure you couldn't convince him to be someone else, like maybe a Napoleon? That's an interesting, quick little dig at the state of mental health care at that point in time.
It's actually a little layered, because it's more than just that. At the time this was filmed, I can't remember when, of course, the play was written. We had a Roosevelt as president, and it was the second Roosevelt. So the person who ran the insane asylum, he says another Roosevelt. So it's a criticism of politics in America as well.
And that comes up when he's talking to the doctor.
Yes, Doctor, I'll run for a third term, but I won't be elected. And that'll mean the last of the Roosevelts in the White House.
That's what you think.
The other thing about his relationship with the aunts is I almost see Teddy as this big child. Like when they're donating the toys and he sees a battleship, like, no, not this one. I need this one later. It's like little kid who doesn't want to give away his toys.
No.
And in that sense, the aunts humoring him seems to me almost like looking at this little kid who has an imagination, like, oh, let him have his fun. Look how happy it makes him. Let him pretend he's Teddy Roosevelt.
Teddy has not committed a crime morally.
No, he thinks he's burying yellow fever pigeons.
Yes. He's been duped into committing.
He is the only unscathed character in the entire film.
Finally, we come to Priscilla Lane, playing Elaine Harper Brewster. Lane began her career as a radio singer with her sister Rosemary before getting parts in films such as The Roaring Twenties with James Cagney, the Hitchcock thriller Saboteur, and the film noir Bodyguard. She kind of has the most thankless role in the movie, unfortunately, in that she's always being kind of pushed off to the side and not being allowed to see what's going on. But she is pretty good for what little is actually asked of her.
I thought she was a lovely woman. I honestly feel like this role was put in place just so that Mortimer could get married and have his potentially perfect American life torn away from him by his family history. You know, by literally finding the bodies in the basement or, you know, the skeletons in the closet.
Right, her arc, especially showing up there at the end and then having, you know, the kiss and it goes away, could have been just that. She could have been an off-screen character almost, just I got married and I'm coming home. Didn't necessarily have to be the girl next door.
I think they chose things like the girl next door and the fact that she was blonde and pretty and sweet.
And the daughter of a preacher.
And the daughter of a preacher as, like, this is the woman that all general men of America want to marry. This is our picket fence dream.
This is the American dream, yeah.
When they're in the phone booth, he says something about her being the daughter of a preacher man and being like the...
There's almost this disgust, like, look at you. Why would you marry me? Look at you've got this and this and this.
But
Why
it's
would you
almost
want
like that kiss at the end. I was just thinking of this. Was almost like, I don't want to say healing, but did something for both of them. Like it erased for her what she saw.
Transitional.
But then it erased for him the same thing. Like now he knows he's not crazy. He knows that they're not really his family. He can basically walk away from it all if he wanted to.
So that's a decision to make. And again, Cary
They're going to do it together.
Yeah. And you know, Cary Grant's character says it earlier. Not only is it illegal, but it's also wrong.
To kind of wrap up how they deal with not going, they don't have any kind of punishment or revelation from the house. Everybody in the house originally goes to either jail or to the loony bin. And this young couple with a promising future has to carry the weight of their history, even though the bad guys have been punished, supposedly.
And finally we come to the director, the great Frank Capra. Capra, of course, is known for his feel-good comedies such as It Happened One Night and You Can't Take It With You, and unabashedly sentimental dramas such as Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Meet John Doe, and It's a Wonderful Life. He would also create the famous Why We Fight documentary film series for U.S. troops during World War II. And it's interesting to look at where this falls in his filmography, that you have these very patriotic and very sweet-natured dramas like It's a Wonderful Life that present this idealized American life in the small town, or idealized American who goes to Congress and has to fight for the little guy. And same with Meet John Doe, the random American stranger who fights for the little guy. And then you have this, where everyone is just completely off-the-wall bonkers. The idealized American life is revealed to be just this insane funhouse mirror.
I think of this as one continuous theme of his. I mean, even if you present a movie like, say, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, you can't really watch that without a certain amount of cynicism. Like, how much of this do you really believe as you're watching it?
The movie presents it all, even the American ideal, as a farce.
Yeah.
And lets you bring to the table all that you already know about it and puts it out there as being, and this is supposed to be silly, and this is supposed to be questioned. And so you can come there and go, oh, wow, I have that life. I have weird stuff in my background too, and everybody can almost relate with that. The sin is you don't have to watch it cynically because the movie's already cynical about itself.
Capra supposedly pushed the actors to go really broad with their performances. In fact, I love that line that's kind of hidden in there when Epstein's trying to convince Mortimer to leave, and Mortimer shouts back at him, "Stop underplaying! I can't hear you."
I didn't even hear that line. That's a great line.
I did read it.
The screenwriter Julius Epstein actually complained about Grant's acting, and Capra had intended to go back and cut down some of the really insane stuff and reshoot a lot of it, but because he had to go to service to shoot the Why We Fight movies, he never really got the chance.
Oh, it needed to be the way it was.
Oh, no, it's perfect that way.
It was so bipolar.
Yeah.
You know?
The tone was necessary, and like you said, it was really a juxtaposition of tones that I've really never seen a film do quite this. And I've seen a lot of, dark comedies, but a dark comedy farce is new to me.
Right, a dark comedy that's a slapstick.
Yes.
A screwball
Do you know what I
comedy
mean?
to some degree,
Like
too,
the
yeah.
fact that they had the pratfalls that they did. And another thing, and we could talk about it more when we talk about cinematography, but the tonal shifts very intentionally, both in the acting and the lighting and the way shots are framed. All like when John shows up, the movie wants to beat you over the head. This is supposed to be a villain. This is supposed to be a monster.
Yes, a horror movie has suddenly
but then
invaded our comedy.
But then the movie's score goes back to like a Home Alone romp score, like out of nowhere.
Watching it again, I was also impressed by how Capra shoots the main set for the house. Of course, it is based on a play, and it's shot almost like stage direction. He actually keeps to the 180-degree rule for a lot of it, and that we're mostly looking at this set from one direction, stage right, stage left. And it is almost like watching a filmed version of the play in some instances. Let's go to the script, which is written by Julius and Philip Epstein. The Epsteins are, of course, best known as being co-writers on Casablanca and winning the Oscar for their work there. They also collaborated on The Man Who Came to Dinner and Mr. Skeffington, which they also produced. And following the death of Philip, Julius also wrote The Tender Trap and Send Me No Flowers. They were both known for kind of strange habits and pranks. Supposedly, Warner Brothers submitted their names to the House Un-American Activities Committee, and they were required to fill out this questionnaire. They asked if they had been members of a subversive organization. Their response was, yes, Warner Brothers. Supposedly, the producers for the film, Howard Lindsay and Russell Crouse, also contributed the screenplay, and the Epsteins actually had to rewrite a lot of it as the film was in production. Some of the differences from the original play text. In the play, Warner was just a drama critic, not an author, and he actually didn't write anti-marriage books, so that's something that was added for the film. And he was only engaged to Elaine, not married. I assume the censors actually insisted that they were married to eliminate any implication of premarital impropriety, with that little hint that we get that they were up to stuff in the taxi cab.
Yeah.
The play originally wasn't set on Halloween. The film originally ended with Mr. Witherspoon from the mental hospital drinking poison and dying, but it was cut after a bad reaction from preview audiences. And they actually added some scenes for the film, including that opening baseball scene with the riot and the bench-clearing brawl, and the scene at the marriage office, which I guess was added to kind of open up the play a little bit.
I love that they leave you with that line, after this you're on your own, before the movie starts getting really wacky.
Yeah,
well, they almost fake you out, because they start with this is happening and it's Halloween, so you're ready to get to like the spooky stuff, and it's just a baseball game.
Yeah.
But a very violent baseball game, too.
The baseball game, though, tonally, what? It didn't make sense.
That's the other thing. It doesn't make sense as to why it's even there.
The only way I can make sense out of it is that baseball is the all-American game. And, of course, we're picking a point where they're fighting. So it's not quite what you'd expect from the ideal baseball game. And I think it's supposed to throw us a little off balance and get us ready for what's coming next, but it doesn't work for me.
I think for me it's sort of an expression of tolerated insanity. I mean, we see these guys playing a game and getting in this ridiculous fight, and yet that's seen as absolutely normal.
The addition just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
It's a really odd moment.
It's wedged in.
Yeah, all it can really
too.
do is tell you you're in New York, and you
Yeah.
can show a bunch of buildings and do the same thing.
Yeah, that doesn't...
Of course, one of the biggest and most unfortunate changes is one of the last lines of the film.
No, I'm not a Brewster. I'm a son of a sea cook.
The original ending line of the play is, "I'm not a Brewster, I'm a bastard!"
Yeah, I'm the son of a sea cook. It changes the meaning of the ending. I think, I'm not a Brewster, I'm a bastard. It's jubilant, and he can acknowledge that he does not have to accept this destiny of madness. I'm the son of a sea cook.
But
Makes me think he has absolutely lost his mind.
I'm a bastard is so much better. It
Yes.
means so much more because he's accepting now an existence that has fault, which he knew his life already had.
But it's
fault.
so much better.
But it's
well. Also, once he actually can start on his marriage, he can own up to the fact that he has been an asshole about it up to this point.
And I'll give what Sarah brought up. It all feels very transitional, and for him to say "I'm a bastard" is more. You know what? Both literally but also I've been a complete dick to this person.
Yeah.
That should be the only person that matters at this point because everyone else in my life sucks.
Let's talk about the cinematography by Saul Polito. Polito also served as director of photography for movies such as The Adventures of Robin Hood, Now Voyager, Sorry Wrong Number, and was nominated for Oscars for his work on The Petrified Forest, another great stage play brought to the screen, Sergeant York, The Private Lives of Elizabeth and Essex, and Captains of the Clouds. And it's got to be a real challenge taking stage-based story, which is mostly one set, and bring it to the screen because there's kind of a limit as to how much you can accomplish with it. but he really does a good job at changing the mood in certain scenes.
The lighting changes, the camera angle changes. It goes into almost expressionism from time to time.
Yes.
With the pointed, church-like fragments of light.
When the door to the cellar was open and they were bringing a body down, those angles are just definitely expressionist.
And it's actually pitch black, and like a lot of movies where it's supposed to be darkness, but we can see what's going on, it's completely blacked out.
Something that was very impressive, I don't remember which character it was, but they were walking down into the cellar using only a match for light.
Yeah, Jonathan Einstein. I made a note of that.
The light was directional. It was perfect, and we don't see that in films now.
I've seen them try to do it in movies like The Grapes of Wrath. They do it here and there with the candlelight. But yeah, they like hid a little light right in the crook of Peter Lorre's arm to light him as he's going. But it's pretty seamless.
It is
really
wonderful.
Looks amazing.
And everything about that, the use of shadow, when Jonathan flat out tells Einstein, "I am going to kill you if you don't go along with this in any less words." He walks away, and the shadow of his face is as tall as Einstein sitting on the stairs to deliver the lines. It's ingenious. There's no other word to really describe. Like, just the use of light, the use of camera angles, the way they filmed the sets. You know, the graveyard New York set outside and the way they filmed all of that looked unbelievable.
And even the basic lighting during most scenes, I mean, a lot of movies from this period had very flat, harsh lighting that illuminated absolutely everything. And just the normal lighting of the set, where it's light coming from different angles, but leaving a good amount of shadow and a good amount of density and texture to it, is really, really beautiful. I also noticed that this might just be a case of the film quality or film stock. It almost looks like a lot of it is shot in almost this sepia tone at points.
Yes.
Like there were points where I could almost pick out what the colors of the outfits they were wearing actually were. I don't know, again, if that's just a matter of the film stock or not, but it's really interesting looking. The music for the film was done by Max Steiner, who's another legend in movie music. He came to attention with his amazing score for King Kong, which is one of the first where the music is actually tied to the action on screen directly. He also wrote scores for Of Human Bondage, the amazing score for Gone with the Wind, Casablanca, Jezebel, The Big Sleep, and The Caine Mutiny, and won Oscars for his music for The Informer, Now Voyager, and Since You Went Away, and won the first Golden Globe for music score for his work on Life with Father. And it's a really bizarre, odd score that mixes so many different motifs and styles.
But he captured every single nuance of this film's tone. And it was very light and gay, and this is the beginning of a wonderful story. And then we'd get some really heavy noir notes, and then there would be a little bit of suspense, and then back into this just happy music. And it was every time there's a tone shift, which in this movie happened constantly, the music would just follow that and enhance it.
The characters have their own score. The musical score for the aunts always had a bit of a church theme until it got just flat out funeral. When Elaine, whenever she shows up, there's always the but sometimes it's played more dark.
Or even the use of Home Sweet Home, ironically, when we first enter the Brewster household, and it keeps coming up later and later as creepier stuff starts happening.
And also the scale changes from minor to major, from major to minor, to let us know that it's not really great home, but we're home. It's home. No matter how bad it is, we're home.
Let's talk a little bit about the design elements of the movie. The house and cemetery were constructed as one giant set, designed by Capra, that allowed the filmmakers to shoot interiors and exteriors. And you can see it whenever anybody opens that front door, you can see kind of the landscape beyond it, which really enhances the reality of it. And that cemetery section of the set is just gorgeous. You have this beautiful forced perspective model of New York behind it, with this scrim over portions of the larger building, so it give it this illusion of depth, and an actual moving model train that keeps going back and forth throughout the scene.
And the fact, to add the more deranged quality to all of this, Elaine being the girl next door, if this cemetery is the Brewster's home cemetery, her house's front door opens up into it. It's just messed up.
It's also a nice visual metaphor about these two people and death coming between them.
We don't talk too much about set dressing. I mean, we're talking about every surface of that house covered in things that were just ornate and full of detail. We have a ledging about a foot down from the ceiling that is just covered in plates and jars and cups, and every surface just has layers upon layers that really does feel like this home has been lived in for generations. Your eye just never stops moving off of it. In contrast, The costumes were very good about keeping it simple. Yes, we had aprons and kerchiefs and everything, but the color schemes were very muted. And you were right, we can definitely guess what the colors are. Mostly blacks and whites.
And also the use of the costuming. When you have a big, brooding, meant to be a villain type of character, if you notice, his clothes didn't fit, and it made him look taller than he even was.
Yeah.
And that they use that a lot. I mean, the tall man, right, uses that. That's the big shtick with him, right? But also, to go back to the point that Sarah was originally making about the fairies and the witch correlation, now I'm thinking back through the movie, they had a very not 1940s look to the garments they were wearing. I think one of them may have even had wrapped armband, like almost like medieval, like Victorian era or Pilgrim era. Like you go back to them, they were really pushing that imagery with the two of them. To the point where you look back at it and it's like, yeah, you know what? The priest who lives across the street, the police, everybody knows what's going on here almost, and they're just letting it be.
The aunts are one character. They are complete opposites. One is tall and thin, the other one is short and stout, one is blonde, one is brunette. They are wearing the opposite clothing. One is wearing a white dress, the other is wearing a black dress, and where they have lace, the one that has white lace has a black dress, the one that has black lace has a white dress, and their brooches, different colored brooches.
Let's get into themes and meanings. One of the big ones is kind of the nature versus nurture divide. That the film plays with this concept of this madness being hereditary, and Mortimer facing this fear that he has the same gene and will at some point take leave of his senses, something borne out by his performance. And it's weird because the revelation that he isn't actually Brewster means that all the insane stuff he's been doing in the meantime is, to a degree, in his head.
Which brings you to nurture. And did this happen? Did he become crazy by growing up in this crazy household? It becomes more of a culture question rather than a genetics question. A few years ago, I would have been able to say this with authority, but I believe nurture nature, the idea of that in psychology, started around the 20s or so. So it was still pretty much a new idea.
Coming to that, the movie offers obviously very fanciful and humorous view of insanity and dated. Do you feel in the current era where the focus on sort of ableist language to the point where people are getting offended by the use of terms such as crazy, even in a non-mental health context, that the depiction of it in this movie is outright offensive?
Not in this movie, because this movie is supposed to be absurd. I am absolutely okay with the depiction of mental illness, especially because we do have Mortimer, who is supposedly our sane hero, coming in and experiencing doubts about himself and really digging deep questions. We never hear him express these worries, but you can see him grappling with the question of his own sanity.
For instance, Teddy in a serious film, like if this were a serious, no farce murder mystery, Teddy would be an offensive character.
Absolutely.
Like that. Because it's, okay, you're just taking a really, really stupidly broad look at this, and your character should actually have real problems. You know, it'd be...
Well, we're looking at levels of insanity. Yeah. We're looking, you know, Teddy, obviously, he is crazy. There is no doubt this man is insane. Then there are the aunts who they're doing something that is wrong and crazy, and they're seeing it from a skewed perspective, but not on the same level. They're not the same type of delusional. And then, of course, we have Mortimer, whose insanity is in question.
And don't forget Jonathan, who I think
and
shows
Jonathan,
some elements of psychopathic behavior. Definitely.
Absolutely.
Right down to having these kind of violent tendencies as a child. Actually, there's a presentation online I'll have to link to in the entry for this episode, posted by someone named Kendrick Umstad, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, that actually attempts to diagnose the characters.
That's
fascinating.
Cool. The presentation suggests the aunts are suffering from schizotypal disorder. Teddy suffers from delusional disorder, grandiose type.
Yep.
And Jonathan from antisocial personality disorder, while Dr. Einstein, of course, suffers from alcohol dependence. And the analysis concludes that the depiction of Jonathan's condition is the most accurate in the movie.
Interesting. There are levels of insanity that we acknowledge as a society. We can say right off the bat, Teddy, you're insane.
Yep.
But it takes a little longer to find out about the insanity of the aunts. They appear fine socially. They interact with their neighbors, with the community. There isn't a problem. You have to dig deeper to see their craziness.
And a lot of psychopaths are actually very good at hiding what's particularly wrong with them and actually blending into society.
Yeah.
very
When
well,
the aunts
so.
go into their funeral mode, they're downright creepy. Their tone and voice and everything even changes. And it's like, we do this because we have to. Why aren't you going along with it?
In the beginning, when one of the aunts murders a man without the other one, the one who comes in and finds out there's been a murder is so excited to see the body and looks almost disappointed that she didn't get to be involved in this.
Which means they're getting a little bit more of just, we're doing this because it's right. There's an enjoyment.
Yes.
Well,
They're exercising a need.
I wasn't sure so much if it was that she didn't get involved as much as she didn't get to meet him. Because they do have this kind of proprietary thing of them being their gentlemen.
do.
That they both like to have gotten to know these people. And there's, even when the new guy who's looking for a room comes in and they're asking him all the probing questions, they like to be
Yeah,
sure
but they
that
pass
they're...
their
I think
judgment
part
way
of
too
it-
quick with him. That's what that kind of shows is they're just, they want to get right to the point.
But
Like,
this is an excuse. Let's say I'm going to ask the questions. Oh, well, do you have a home? Are you married? Do you have family? These are questions that murderers find out when they don't want to get caught. This is a person who has no ties, who will disappear, and nobody will question it.
But we see also they don't really have a fear of being caught because they're willing to call the police at one point, and they even actually tell the cop, "Oh yes, we have graves in the basement." So
That's
covering
true.
up their crime
But
isn't
that's
really.
a delusion. But that's a delusion, though. I think it's a real delusion, and they honestly don't believe what they're doing is wrong. But still,
Well, that's again why I don't really see them as evil. I do think they are completely deluded, and they
They're
think what they're
screwed.
doing is a nice charitable act. I don't think there actually is any malice in it, really. That brings us to the theme of matrimony. With the aunt's victims all being bachelors and Mortimer getting married despite his anti-marriage feelings, it feels like the movie is trying to present this kind of simplistic view of marriage as the ideal that everyone should be aspiring to. If you don't get married, there's a chance you're going to get poisoned by some crazy old lady in a house at some point. And that Mortimer actually coming around and accepting his marriage and going off is what he's supposed to be doing.
Something I'd like to point out, none of these characters are married except for Mortimer, and he did so almost under duress.
Yeah.
We've got two maiden aunts, the crazy brother, the other crazy brother, and we don't see any real emotional connections.
right.
That is true.
It depicts marriage as the new concept in his family, at least a working marriage. I mean, even from the people we find out were his actual parents, there seems to be a fracture on both sides.
But also
You know.
marriage is sort of the norm, that the
Right.
fact that he's not a member of this family, none of whom, as you mentioned, are married, means he can go off with his wife and have this married life that's supposed to be the normal American
Oh,
life.
yeah,
If you don't
he's
get married,
cutting
you're going to end
ties.
up a lonely spinster.
Yes,
Yeah, that-
exactly. Anybody who's not married is sort of off-center or askew. There's something wrong with them in the way
also
this film's conception.
Interesting thing is that for a movie of the time period, it doesn't seem to necessarily be fully pushing matrimony in the religious sense. I mean, the movie's pretty heavy-handed in the fact that the preacher isn't very fond of these two getting married. Do you know what I mean? And so it kind of has that, is this a new form of marriage? Do you know what I mean? Is this we do it because we're actually in love and not that there's a reason for it?
It also might explain why Mortimer goes from anti-marriage to suddenly deciding, yes, he wants to get married, because he sees that at his shot of being normal. After being raised in this really bizarre family and trying to get away from that, just getting married and settling down, that's his chance to distinguish himself from them and prove that he is normal where they're not.
I wanted to talk about their names a little bit.
Sure.
Mortimer, of course, Mort, M-O-R-T, is for death. So Mortimer, we know surrounding him is going to be a lot of death. Abby and Martha, this took a minute because both of the names were just triggering something in me. Abby, as in Abigail Adams. Martha, as in Martha Washington.
Oh, yeah, no shit. Nope, that's
yeah.
right on.
So that is Martha Washington, of course, the first lady, and Abigail Adams, the second first lady. And then, of course, we have Teddy Roosevelt, who was the president. So we need to really dig into the layers of American history. We're being told with these names that there's a lot to do here with history and what the country has been, the foundation the country was built on. So going from that and talking about the foundation of our country, America, they're burying bodies in the basement, which we can kind of go further and say that we're building America on the bodies of people who were less, quote unquote, fortunate.
While maintaining this respectable front. They're
And
the most
Absolutely.
respected
and the
people in the
Christian
neighborhood.
charity.
Exactly.
The Christian charity and all of that was the building blocks of us coming over
Giving
here.
them
and-
poison.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, wow.
Well, they talk about the Brewsters coming in on the Mayflower.
Yep.
Yes.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
I mean, that's there
Ding,
as
ding,
well.
ding.
And the graveyard in the backyard. So they buried their own dead sacredly to them, Christian sacred, in burial grounds with stones. And the people that they were mercifully releasing from their lives are buried in the basement. They're given some kind of rites, but there's no marker.
And the only one we get any
Oh wait,
sort of
I'm sorry, there
religious...
were
were
markers.
markers.
No,
Yeah.
they were the flowers.
No, she said they had
They said
markers
they'd
too.
markers,
Yep.
So
but
she put
they,
flowers
but they're
up them.
still they're hidden.
But they're hidden, and she said because they're obviously the less fortunate can go out to
Exactly.
that religious thing because they said, oh, he's a Methodist.
Yep.
There's the comment when it comes to Jonathan and Einstein's corpse is, oh, he's a foreigner.
Yes.
He's a foreign. Wow. Yep.
Well, there's something beyond that. There, all of the talk of Brooklyn at the time, and it's changing. Everything's changing. That's the state of immigration in the 40s,
Yes.
in the late 30s and 40s. The immigrants are coming in, and even though we were there first and did the exact same things, we look upon these foreigners as less than us as well.
And there's a segregation
Yes.
thing going on. Oh, you can't put a Methodist and the foreigner in the same grave. It wouldn't be right.
Because in their minds, the Methodist is a better human being, and you
those-
can't
and
mingle
these
that.
are our bodies.
Yeah.
And we claim them. And this guy, no, he needs to be removed immediately.
Yeah, we're gonna call the police
Cooties.
and
Even
get
though
his-
they're still segregated from the other graves, and they're
Right.
building their home on a graveyard. It's not like it's a graveyard in the backyard. This home is built on these
right.
bodies.
But on top of that, they are gonna call the police and have him literally deported.
Yeah, that's crazy. Good old Capra.
Going from the names again, their last name Brewster, B-R-E-W, as in brewing, and the idea that these aunts are witches.
I never put two and two together with why there was the witch and the broom in the opening and closing credits.
Yeah.
Because it just seemed too... That opening and ending credit sequence is like the opening of a Bugs Bunny cartoon.
Going forward with the United States and having Abigail and Martha and Teddy representing politics and the growing of America, we have police and we have the clergy, both of which are sanctioning these murders in one way or another.
Oh, and we have the medical establishment that is
That's
completely
true.
missing what's going on in this household.
100%, even when they're told.
Well, there's a big theme of the play within the play. We have the cop reciting his play. We have Mortimer as playwright. And Witherspoon, head of the mental hospital, also wanted to talk about his play. And every time they spoke about the plays, or each person spoke about their play, they were really describing the scene around them in that moment, unwittingly.
Now, in it, there's a man. Now, listen to this. Now, he knows he's in a house with murderers, so he ought to know he's in danger. He's even been warned to get out of the house. And does he go?
Yes.
No, he doesn't. He stays. Huh. This fella doesn't even have sense enough to be scared.
No.
Or to be on his guard. No. The murderer even invites him to sit down. And what do you think he does?
Oh, I don't know.
He sits down. Isn't that wonderful? He deliberately pulls up a chair like that, and he sits down in it. Isn't that great?
This play is very wink. This
Yeah.
is a play. This is a farce. This is fiction. So you're being reminded over and over how much this is fiction, but there are some real world problems.
For some of the little trivia of the movie, the title comes from the expression lavender and old lace, a term which would describe homes of elderly women which would be decorated with too much lace and would smell of lavender.
The scent of lavender is still associated with older women. Yeah, I really have no idea why. I remember my grandmother smelled like lavender.
Jonathan and Einstein's conversation about one of their victims dying from pneumonia after being shot may be a reference to the assassination of President Garfield, who didn't die from his bullet wounds in his assassination attempt, but caught pneumonia from improperly sterilized surgical tools, which again goes to that Americana theme.
Yeah,
that you mentioned going through the film.
given how heavy this screenplay is with presidents, I would not be surprised.
One of the tombstones in the cemetery has the name Archie Leach on it, which was actually Cary Grant's birth name. And in the 1970s, a remake had been planned with Richard Pryor in the lead, but never materialized. I wonder how that would have gone to have Richard Pryor in that role.
He's got the eyes for it.
I remember his movies in the 70s, and he is a broad actor to begin with, but I think knowing that this role was supposed to be played broad, it would have been too much.
The play itself continues to be mounted. Just as recently as 2003, Michael Richards was in it playing the Jonathan role, which...
That surprises me, and I'd really be interested to see some footage of that.
Yeah, actually, I think that would be awesome, as weird as that
It's
sounds.
almost a little against type, which I'm interested in.
Well, because everybody being so broad, Jonathan, I won't call the character of Jonathan in this one note, but Jonathan is played in a way that I am supposed to be nothing more than than Boris Karloff, right? That's like the whole thing. So there's no more to the character other than I've heard all of these people before, and me just being in the room makes them uncomfortable.
Right.
All right, anybody want to go with their favorite scene?
I had two. I liked, obviously, when we first see him finding out about the aunt's crimes, how just nonchalant they were, and how, like, off the wall he was. And then again, when he sees the body from his brother's murder in the seat, and he realizes it's a completely different body, and it's the same thing all over again.
Ye gods, there's another one! And Abby! And Martha, come in here! No, you come in here now!
Yes, dear, what is it? Where's Elaine?
Wait a minute. Didn't you promise me not to let anyone in the house while I was gone?
Well, Jonathan just walked in.
I don't mean Jonathan.
And Dr.
And I don't mean Dr. Einstein. Who is that in the window seat?
We told you, Mr. Hoskins.
It is not Mr. Hoskins. There.
Who can that be?
He gets exasperated almost at what is wrong with everyone around me. Why is everyone killing everybody?
My all-time favorite scene in this movie, and it played just as well this time as the last time I saw it, was during the great big final fight, when Mortimer just goes and out of exasperation. This fight, he's not a part of it, steps out, goes on the steps, and just has a cigarette and comments on it all while it's going on. You don't even get to see it. Comments it on it like an audience member watching it.
Go ahead, fight. Go ahead. Oh, don't do that, please.
Get him, Pat.
Oh, that won't have any effect.
I tried to phone. Oh, it did. Isn't that amazing? Oh, dear. Wish I could relax like that.
And I just felt that those really sum up the brilliance of this movie.
My favorite scene is Mortimer is tied up and he's gagged, and Dr. Einstein and Jonathan are just going to have a little glass of wine. And as an audience, we are tense. We know that they're not going to die because that would ruin the rest of the movie, but you want them to, and you're still so on the edge of your seat.
Oh, I'm so happy that we don't have to operate without a drink.
Doctor, one moment, please. Where are your manners? Yes, Mortimer. I realize now that it was you who brought me back to Brooklyn. We drink to you, Doctor, to my dear dead brother.
Prosit.
The moment the glasses drop, you're like, oh.
For me, it's a tiny little moment, but it's the moment when Jonathan and Dr. Einstein come in through the side window. I love that it arrives with this giant burst of music.
luggage through here.
And
Was
tries
wonderful.
to make this scene completely normal.
Right.
All right, what's everybody's recommendations? If somebody liked this movie, what do you think they'd also like?
I have 2 recommendations. If you liked this movie, I would see The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, Her Lover, which is another murder farce. And it's done in such a style, the way it's staged is very minimalist. And it's definitely a movie you have to watch and think about as it's going on, but it is wonderful. And also a French film called Delicatessen. It is incredible, and if you want to take farce as far as it can go, farce almost into magical realism, and again, murders, you have to see this movie.
It's a fantastic movie. First, from just being full-on farce in a movie that lets you know when you're getting into it that it's farce, and just because I saw it recently with Sarah, I'm going to go with The Princess Bride. This movie just makes me think of that. Just the way the characters deliver their lines, almost with a complacency, like, we're above this. We're above this and we're right there with you, that what just happened right there was ridiculous. You know, it reminded me of any multitudes of scenes from that film, and the poisoned wine. Fargo, the fact that it could be so goddamn funny while still being so goddamn dark. Fargo's a little bit less of a farce, but still has the bumbling idiot characters just happen to be pulling this stuff off. Lady Killers, of course, because if you're going to talk about the Coen brothers and Fargo, you got to talk about that one. And Christmas Vacation, just because his exasperation is Clark W. Griswold when the police are breaking his doors down. It's our family's first kidnapping.
Well, all these family members coming, like Cousin Eddie coming out of the blue, and then just everything falling down around Clark. His reaction is the same as Cary Grant's, with the just screw it.
I've got a couple. One would be the Alfred Hitchcock movie, The Trouble with Harry, where there's this corpse that nobody really knows where it came from, but everybody assumes is their own fault and goes to ridiculous trouble trying to cover it up. It has that same sense of humor. I kept watching this thinking Hitchcock must have really enjoyed that kind of dark, morbid sense of humor in this one. Another one is the really bizarre Jack Hill horror movie Spider Baby, another movie with a case of a family that has kind of congenital madness, and this one poor character, in that case Lon Chaney Jr., trying to keep them under wraps and keep them from exposing themselves to the outside world, and has a similarly really uncomfortable dinner scene with these apparently normal, sane people trying to interact with these completely demented other people across the table and act like everything is totally fine. And another one is an older one called A Slight Case of Murder with Edward G. Robinson as a mobster who tries to go straight, and just when he does, the other mobsters just try to whack him, and he ends up with these 4 corpses on his lawn, and his guys deal with them, and they're trying to get rid of the corpses, set them up in these other places, trying to orchestrate these sort of murder tableaus, and actually are competitive about, well, mine was cooler. I think mine makes a lot more sense. But it has that same kind of crazy farce quality that this one does. All right, Bully. That ends our conversation, but not the discussion. If you'd like to have your say about Arsenic and Old Lace, or feel that we missed something, check out the comments section for this episode on CinemaSpection.com and start talking. Email your comments, complaints, questions, and suggestions to CinemaSpection@gmail.com, and we're on Twitter as well. You can also like our Facebook page, and our show is available on Stitcher and iTunes. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to us, and if you have a moment to spare, please leave us a review. We appreciate any feedback you can offer. We'll be back to discuss another movie next time. Until then, remember to keep watching closely. There's more to a movie than just what's on the screen.